Hi, Valley View Junior High. My name is Abby Morneau, and I'm a 2008 Valley View grad. I'm also a graduate of Kent State University with a degree in education, and American University in Washington, D.C. With a degree in international education. Since graduating with my degree in education, I have been a high school teacher for several years, both in Malawi, Africa, as a volunteer first, in Dayton, Ohio, as an algebra teacher, and then back here where I currently am, again in Malawi as a school administrator, a principal. So I was also teaching math and the principal of a high school here in Malawi. The biggest part of my job as a principal here in Malawi has been to create the school from scratch. So in Malawi, only about 20% of students who are 8th graders are able to go on to secondary school. And that's just because there aren't enough schools for all of the kids to continue on to high school. And so when I was a volunteer here back in 2012, 2013, 2014, we had a lot of conversations about, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we started our own school? And so while I was back in the US teaching and also getting my master's degree, we worked really hard to find funding, find money for us to do this project. And when the money came through, then I came here to Malawi to start building the school. And so I wasn't the one actually building. I didn't lay the bricks or pour the cement or anything. But my job was to create the school on paper, as far as what does the daily schedule look like? What does the class schedule look like? Which teachers do we have? How do we hire teachers? What curriculum do we teach? What textbooks do we use? What policies do we have in place for our students, for admitting students? How do we decide what time to eat lunch during the day? How do we get the food to feed our students lunch? How do we, if our students want to play a soccer match with other schools, how do we get buses and everything together so that our students can travel to other schools? So all of these things that are in place in your school and have been for a very long time, we started here with nothing in Malawi. And so I was able to use my experience as a teacher for a couple years to put into practice some good policies for us to get going. And now as the school is finishing its 3rd year and entering its 4th year, it is a full school. So we're no longer designing what's happening, but there's a plan in place that every day, students wake up at this time, they report to class at this time, teachers do this and do that. And so everything throughout the day, throughout the school term, throughout the school year is decided already, even though 3 years ago we didn't have anything in place. And so my job was to design what was happening at the school. So you can think about, what happens to you on a daily basis. What time does the bell ring? Which teacher did you get assigned to this year, or multiple teachers? How many tests do you have in a term? How many? When's your school holidays? All of these things that seem kind of simple, if you don't have them in place, can be a little bit difficult. And so things as simple as a daily schedule to something a little bit more concrete to teacher professional development or hiring processes and all of these things that make a school function, that has been my job to create. And now, as I've hired my replacement as someone who can take over the school from me, I'm able to hand over a full school to someone else. Where a couple years ago I started with nothing. So it's been really exciting to be a part of that. And so how did I learn how to do this? I used my experience, of course, like I said, as a teacher, But I also, in my master's degree, studied a lot about different schools all over the world. And so I was able to kind of compare and contrast what's happening in Malawi versus its neighbors in Tanzania and Mozambique and Zambia. But what is also happening in Asia and Europe and America? And how can we take those best practices for those schools and for those cultures, and how do they fit here in Malawi? So some positives and negatives of working in international development. I'm going to start with the negatives. I would say that it's a real challenge sometimes to work internationally. You're away from your family, and you're in a different culture and in a different space that is not necessarily normal to you or feels like home. And so it takes a lot of adjusting, and it can also be a challenge to be away from your family. So because of COVID, I wasn't able to come home this year for my visit every August. So I miss being able to hug my mom and dad and be there for birthdays and holidays and things like that. But I'm lucky enough that I have access to the internet and can call and all of those things. So that can be a challenge if you're working internationally. You're far from home, and so that can be a challenge, whether you're adjusting to a new culture or a new diet, just a new way of life. It can be challenging. For me here in Malawi, I didn't have indoor plumbing, so that's a problem sometimes. I also did not have regular electricity. I had solar power, which was not strong enough that I could have a stove or an oven, so I was using charcoal to cook over a fire every single day for all of my meals. Even if I wanted to boil water to make coffee, I had to start a fire. And so that can be a challenge specific to being here in Malawi and living in the rural area. If you're in town or in the city, that's not a problem. But where I work here in a very rural area, they don't have that access. The positives far outweigh those challenges. I am so lucky. As much as it can be a negative to be in different cultures and in different places, it can also be a real positive. So I really enjoy learning about different cultures and meeting people from all over the world. I've had the opportunity, because I'm here in Africa, to kind of travel around Africa. So I've been able to go to Victoria Falls a couple of times in Zambia. I've gone to Zanzibar and Tanzania. I've gone on safaris and hiked and done all of these really cool things here in Africa and in Southeast Africa, and it's been a real treat to be able to travel like that. But the biggest positive of my career, my job, is that I know at the end of the day, my work is making a difference, and that is really important to me. We're all have our own privileges, and I grew up very comfortable. I always knew where every meal was coming from. I knew that my family was there and stable and loved me and did everything to take care of me. And so to whom much is given, much is required. And so I kind of felt that calling, and that my career needs to be dedicated to something that is bigger than myself. And so it's really important to me that whatever project or whatever job I'm working on, that it's not about me. It's not about Abby. It's not about what I'm getting out of it. It's what is my community, or what are my students, or what's the world getting out of what I'm working on and contributing to. And so that's the biggest positive is being able to see that what I'm doing is making a difference. And so to just wrap up, I want to explain that I got into this career of working in international development education through experience, and through not necessarily through my education, but through hands-on experience, because I was here in Malawi, and because I was volunteering with and then later working for an organization here in Malawi. And so it's not that someone typically in my job has been a teacher in the past or came through a teacher education program at college. But it's typically, if you want to work in international development, you can typically come in a few different ways, but most commonly it's through majoring in international relations, public policy, and economics. And so that is very different from my personal education background, but it's most common that people are coming through in those ways. Of course, there are other avenues such as public health, medicine, all of these different ways, because international aid has projects in tons of different areas. And so I happen to work in education, but I have friends who work in public health, friends who work in the environment, all of the above. There are different areas of development work that you can work in, and so you can either come through in those ways, but it's most common through international relations and public policy and economics. I also want to point out that when I look back to my time in junior high or my time in high school, that's where it started for me. It didn't start when I was in college. It didn't start when I was in the classroom as a teacher. It started when I was in high school. The different clubs that I was in, volunteering in different places, whether it's in my community or across the country or across the world. Look for those opportunities. If that's something that you're interested in, you don't have to wait to get started until you're in college. You don't have to wait until you get started in your first job. You can start now. So build those experiences and learn as much as you can about people who are different than you, people who look different than you, and people who have different experiences from you. Because that's how you're really going to know not only who you are, but what you want. So I encourage you to seek out any opportunity that gets you involved, especially in your community, but in other places as well.